we'll go ahead and get started. I have taught Reading Mastery Level 3 for several years when it first came out. I have not taught, as far as with children, anything lower than that, but I have been to the training. So we're going to go through some of the concerns and questions that you have, talk about some key components that you need to incorporate anytime that you are doing Reading Mastery. And I had planned on starting with Level K, but I understand that you all may not be doing that level, and those teachers, some teachers may be coming in a little bit. So I'm actually going to start with Level 2, and then we'll go back and give them time to get here, okay? Now, Level 2 is usually taught to students that are in grade 3 that are about 1 year behind. And it runs from about 2.5 to about 3.5 is the range the book runs. And Level 2 is focused mainly on vocabulary and comprehension. And it's very risk-paced, but you get right into the comprehension component or the story fairly quickly, which is completely opposite of what's going to happen in Levels K and 1. So what I thought we would do, just to give you an idea of what Level 2 is going to look like if you are teaching that level, you're going to be my students for just a moment, and we're going to sort of kind of walk through a lesson. Okay? Now, one thing that you would want to do, wherever you're going to have your group, and this rule would apply to any age group that you have, it's best if you have a table to sit at. You can set students in a horseshoe shape, but you know as well as I do, if there's nothing in front of them, it's very easy for them to fidget and start playing around. So if they're confined to a table, that works a little bit better. But you want to be sitting at the table with them so that you're at eye level with them instead of being above them looking down. And you know the group of students that you have pretty quickly. You're going to see that there are some students that are harder to keep their attention. So you want those students to be within arm's reach of you, okay? Now, I have done it where I sit like on the horseshoe table or the kidney-shaped table that many of you have, and I've had my two maybe that were rowdier right here, and that didn't work as well for me as it did to have them exactly in front of me. So you will have to find out what works, but once you get the seating arrangement, I would stick with that arrangement at all times. It just seems to work better, unless you start having a pair that start fussing or whatever, and then you have to move them around. So it's very important that you do that. Another thing that would apply to any level that you are teaching is every single day when you start the lesson, number one, you want the supplies to where they can be distributed very, very quickly, and you want to get right into the lesson, but you want to review your rules for Reading Mastery every day. And there's a couple of different ways that you can do it, but the easiest set of rules that I found was to use the word STAR, S-T-A-R. And you would say to them, boys and girls, let's remember our rules. Sit up straight, track with your fingers, always respond, and respect your group. So we would go through that every single day. Now, the way that I would make sure that they were doing those rules is I would have what was called the teacher-student game. Are you familiar with the teacher-student game? May I know that? Yeah,
absolutely.
And I'm just going to write on the back of this folder. Okay? Let's pretend that this is a spot on your board. Okay? You would put T for teacher and S for student. When you see the students doing a good job, you don't just say to them, you all earned a point because you did a good job. Be very specific. I like the way little Johnny was tracking with his finger. Okay? Or, did you notice how Susie was sitting up nice and straight? I'm relating it to our 4 rules. But at the same token, if somebody's not doing what they should be doing, I wouldn't call them by name, but I would say something like, someone in this group just was not responding. I've earned a teacher point. And usually that peer pressure is all that's needed. So if you keep an ongoing game like this, and what I would suggest is have a spot where you can leave this displayed, and the very first day set a goal. For example, when we get 20 points, when you get 20 points, you'll get a sticker or a piece of candy or something, or a popsicle. You can't say, we'll go outside and play, because we're not allowed to give up that time, but you can give them a little treat. Then maybe the next time raise it to 30 points or raise it to 40 points. Make your increments a little bit bigger. But if they have a goal to work for, they usually are going to do really well at that. And it may take a few seconds every time, but it's very worth it because you've established the rules, you're back into the routine, they know what is expected of them. And the peer pressure does seem to work, okay? All right, so let's pretend that you all are my students and we're a level 2, and it's very early in the year, and we are at lesson number 4 in our book. When you came in and you sat down and you had your pencil and ready, and I would have extra pencils just in case, you would say, boys and girls, remember our rules to sit up straight, track with your fingers, always respond, and respect your group. Find page 338 in your book. 338. These are sentences that you'll be working with during the year. They contain vocabulary words that you'll learn. Touch sentence 1. Oh, boys and girls, I like the way all of you all are tracking. You've earned a point for that. It says, you measure your weight in pounds. Everyone say that sentence. Get ready.
You measure your weight in pounds.
Close your eyes and say that sentence. Get ready.
You measure your weight in pounds.
Listen, you measure your weight in pounds. When you measure something, you find out how long it is, or how hot it is, or how heavy it is, or how tall it is. The sentence tells about measuring weight. The weight of an object is how heavy that object is. Who knows how much they weigh? Of course, I wouldn't ask a grown woman that, but you know.
115 pounds.
115. All right. Very good. Very good. So you would get a few responses. Now, that's not the kind of question where everybody's going to have the same response. So that's why I might say, who can? But if it's something where I wanted everybody to give me an answer, I might say, everybody. And that's letting me know that I'm expecting a response. And by using this signal, that's telling them that I'm expecting a response from them. Now, I did this a minute ago, and you didn't even notice it, but I hadn't told you that. Remember when I said, say that sentence? I said, get ready, and I snapped my fingers, and you all started saying that sentence. But I hadn't even told you that that was my signal. I should have done that ahead of time. So whatever your signal's going to be, establish that early. When you say, this means I want you to listen and wait, this means I want you to respond, or this means I want you to respond, but you come up with a signal and use that signal consistently. Okay? Now, when I first did that, some of you were a little bit hesitant about when should I say something. Had you have known ahead of time when I snapped my fingers, that's when you respond, it would have been in more unison than it was. So you would continue on that way. Everybody understand how that works? Now what will happen with this sentence here, this sentence will be referred to all week long. In every single lesson, we'll review that sentence. But it gets to the point when you don't have to turn back to the book anymore. You just know that sentence. And when we get down here, you still know that sentence because we've referred to it throughout. And in that sentence, we've talked about measure and weigh, and we're going to talk about pounds. So you're constantly building vocabulary through these sentences. So let's say we have gotten through that part, and now we're ready to get into the actual lesson. Now we're going to go back and find lesson 4 in our book. Lesson 4.
Is it better to have like a signal that they can hear? Because if they're looking at the sentence.
It can be, and that's why I usually snap my fingers for my signal that I do. I have seen people do like a tap. This is fine. A clap, as long as it's not real loud. You just have to look at the makeup of your group. If somebody gets really, if it makes them jump and gets real jittery, then you might not want to do something that's very loud. But you have to find the signal that works for you. But I mean, that worked for me, but that's not the only one, okay? Now, in your teacher's guide, you're going to see in places, you can see in blue. The blue is the lines that you're going to be saying. And you'll see sometimes a little check mark after that. What that means is when you say that, like if I said down here on this lesson, find lesson 4 in your book, touch column 1, that check mark, that would tell me I need to make sure that you're touching that. Now, you may think, well, why do we need to do that? We want to make sure that the students are looking at the written word and not just hearing it. So that's why we want them to make eye contact, and that has to do with the finger tracking. Okay? So I have said to you, find lesson 4 in your textbook, touch column 1. Word 1, now see I've got my signal up. Word 1 is alive. What word?
Alive.
Spell alive. Get ready.
A-L-I-V-E.
Word 2 is seasons. What word?
Seasons.
Again, word 2 is seasons. What word?
Seasons.
Again, word 2 is seasons. What word?
Seasons.
Now, why do you think I did that? Because you said it right the first time.
For practice.
For practice, to get it a little bit brisk, okay? And like when you were spelling alive, it was a little bit slow. What I would do is I would start tapping a little bit faster to get that cadence up a little bit on the word. So let's pretend we're trying this again. Word 1 is alive. What word?
Alive.
Spell alive. Get ready.
ALIVE.
Word 2 is seasons. What word?
Seasons.
Spell seasons. Get ready.
SEASONS.
See the difference? Okay. Now, you think, well, what's the big deal? Well, number 1, it keeps them more engaged. If the lesson is going faster, you're going to get through more, for sure. You're less likely to lose the attention of some because they don't have time to let their mind wander. Now, why do you think they're asked to spell the words? Because this is not spelling, this is reading.
To be able to identify, they have to know the letters that make up the word. Right?
Because in the earlier lessons, they focused on the letters and the sounds and how those relate together. So that's reinforcing that the letters in alive have a sound, and that's why those letters together make the word alive. So it's just reinforcing that, okay? All right, let's skip down to column 2. Because every time you have a column, your directions are going to change or your skill's going to change. Without going over it yet, what do you notice about the words in column 2? ing. So we're going to be talking about ing or the suffix. Find column 2. All these words end with the letters ing. Word 1, what word?
During.
Again, word 1, what word?
During.
Word 2, what word?
Blowing.
Word 3, what word?
Cheering.
Again, word 3, what word?
Cheering.
Again, word 3, what word?
Cheering.
Very good. Trying to get that pace up. So that's all you do there. Then look at column 3. These words have more than one part. The first part of each word is underlined. Word 1. What's the underlined part?
App.
What's the whole word?
Apple.
Yes, apple. Word 2. What's the first part?
Love.
What's the whole word?
Loved.
Yes, loved. Word 3. What's the first part?
Great.
What's the whole word?
Greatest.
Very good. Now, did you notice that I repeated apple and I repeated loved? Why do you think I would do that? Because it's really not in the script for you to have to say that. So what could be a reason to do that?
Well, I know that I didn't repeat it, so maybe that was to make sure everybody.
Okay, could be. And it's also an affirmation that you have said the word correctly. You don't ever want to affirm a wrong response, but if you can affirm a correct response, that is good. Now, in your script, you can't take anything away from that, but it's okay to add just a little bit to it if you need to, like that affirmation. Now, if somebody had said the word wrong, for example, the third part was great. When I asked what's the underlined part, if one of you had said greet, I would say, listen, my turn. The underlined part is great. Your turn, what's the underlined part? And you'd say great. I would correct it immediately. Okay? So let's say we've gone through all 6 of those words in that box, and you got to word number 6, and it was missed. And I said, listen, my turn, and I corrected it. You think I'm done with that box?
Probably have to repeat them again.
The whole box. You repeat the whole list again. You go through it again to make sure they can do it again. Because there's been a little gap. You've gone through a few more words. Can they remember that word when they come to it the next time? Now, it may not say that in here. It just may say repeat until firm. That's how it's firm, when they can go through the list again without making that same mistake. Then you go over to column 4. Column 4 is basically you're working on your fluency, getting your words up. So let's practice our speed. Word 1, what word?
Grow.
Word 2, what word?
Bark.
The bark of a tree is the covering of the tree trunk and branches. It's like the skin. Some trees have very thick bark. Everyone, what do we call the covering of the tree trunk? Get ready?
Bark.
Yes, bark. Word 3, what word?
Trunk.
Word 4, what word?
Howl.
Word 5, what word?
Branches.
Word 6, what word?
Care.
See how I did that? Just very, very quick. And I would even say we need to get our pace up as adults, just a little bit there. And you just do that through practice, and the kids pick up on that. Then word 5, once again, you're just building some fluency there. And then you get, actually, if you turn the page, you will get into the story. In the story, sometimes you'll have a part B and a part C. If you have a part B, it is almost like an informational piece that's giving you some background information that they need in order to understand part C. Now, there may be questions that you ask from part B. There will be questions in the workbook pages that go with part B, but most of them will be related to part C. And what they learn here in part B, this information passage, will not only help them with this passage of C, but the next lesson, and the next lesson, and the next lesson. Because it's not like you have a new story on a completely new topic every day. It may take 5 days to talk about one topic. It's in little bitty pieces. So you're constantly going back and you're reviewing and pulling information. So it's very important that you make sure they understand the information passage B. Now, if you were reading this out loud, the way that you would do this is you're calling on students to read randomly, of course, no round robin. Students are asked to finger track at all times, but you're not saying, okay, Miss Donna, you read this page, you read that page, or you read this paragraph, you read that paragraph. You switch it about every 2 or 3 sentences. So in mid-paragraph, you're going to be switching over to somebody else. So what I would say is if I said, Donna, would you start reading? When she reads, in my mind, I'm already thinking who's going to go next. So as soon as she gets to that period, I've called the next name and the next person is ready to go. I don't want to be going, let's see, Gala, would you go next? I don't want to waste that time. I want to get right into it, okay? If I see someone is not paying attention like they should, I'm going to stop and give myself a point and explain. I've earned a point because somebody's not finger tracking and following along. If I feel like I'm constantly having to redirect one person because they're not paying attention like they should, I may ask them to read a lot. Just like every other time, I may ask them to read. Now, I'm going to ask Donna to read for us first, and I want you to make a mistake on purpose, Miss Donna, okay?
Okay.
All right. So, finger track.
Apple trees are the same from forest trees.
Listen, my turn. Apple trees are different from forest trees. Your turn.
Apple trees are different from forest trees. Forest trees are tall and straight. Apple trees are short and not so straight.
Courtney.
Forest trees have very small branches. Apple trees have large branches. Here is a forest tree. Here is an apple tree.
Okay. Then, what you'll see in your teacher's guide is not the whole text, but a small portion of the text. Then there are comprehension questions that you ask related to that portion. Then you do another portion and more questions. Now, sometimes in your questions, like this one says, everybody, which tree is tall and straight? So I'm expecting a response from everybody. Sometimes it'll be an open-ended question where I have to call on someone to give that answer. Does that make sense? Any questions about that part right there?
Okay, so when it says everybody, that's when
If
everybody responds.
yes, that's when you.
If it just says which tree is short and not so straight, that's when you would ask just
You
someone,
could. If
or-
it's like this one, which tree has small branches, and the answer is forest tree, and you know that's the only possible answer, it would be perfectly fine to say, everybody, which tree? You see what I'm saying? If you know that there's only one possible answer.
Okay.
If it's something that there could be many answers, then you would want to call on someone. And if, let's say if there's many choices, I might say, ask the question to Courtney, but then ask it again to her, and ask it to her, and ask it to you, just to see other possible responses. Now, when you get through the story, what they're going to do then is they're going to have a workbook page that's going to ask them some questions related to what they've just read and related to the vocabulary words that are in it. And if you look at your book, you will see Part C, here are some questions, and you'll say number your paper from 1 to 17. I usually had notebook paper in there for them, just so we didn't have to fight to try to find stuff. And you have to be very specific in setting timelines on this, because otherwise they can take forever to get it done. So you would say something like, I expect you to be able to have this done in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And then you have to have a plan in place for when they get done early. So I would usually say to them, if you finish before time to check, go ahead and start reading silently on the next passage. So everybody had something to do. You should have, if you keep your pace brisk enough, and you have, say, 45 minutes, you should be able to get through a lesson, get through their independent work, which is here and in a workbook, and check both of them out loud before you leave. Now, when they check their work on the notebook paper and on the workbook page, depending on how much time you have left, you can call on students to read the question and give their answer, or you can read the question and call on someone to tell you what they had. If they miss it, they are to draw a line through it with a red pen and not do anything else at that point. Just draw a line through it to show they've missed it. Then when you get done checking, they have to go back and correct their mistakes. Now, if you had them corrected immediately, they know the answer. They're just writing down what you just said. If they have to wait and come back to it, then you're going to see, do they remember what the correct answer is at this point? So that's how that works. And then there are forms. I don't know, have you all seen any of the forms to keep the data on? There are forms, and where you get them is if you go to the Fentress County website and you look down the left-hand column, you will see like different type of resources, and there will be one that says literacy. And if you click on it, Miss Tina's picture will come up, and then it will say SRA Reading Mastery Forms, Level K, 1, 2, 3, Corrective Reading. You just click on that, and it'll show it, and then you print it. Now, you want to keep track of all of your data, especially if you have a student that's starting to get below the 80th percentile. That's a warning sign. What's going on? Do we have them in a level that's too difficult for them? Are they missing a lot of school and getting behind? Because the story builds, and if they have a high absentee rate, then they have a harder time remembering some of the stories from the past. Are they not paying attention? What could be the reason? And if we see a whole bunch of scores below the 80th percentile, then we may have to say, this is not the best group for them. We're moving too fast for them. They need to back up a little bit. So always pay attention to your data. And what you might want to consider doing too is taking a highlighter and highlighting any scores that's below the 80th percentile. And that way it's really going to stand out to you. Okay. Did you have a question? No, okay. You're also going to have what's called fluency checks, which about every 5 lessons or so, they're going to have to read for you, and it's timed. And the first couple of times they do it, they are so nervous, bless their heart. But it's not really a code read. What they're tested over is yesterday's lesson. And it'll be like from flower to flower or from star to star. They'll try to read that passage in the minute. And what you're doing is you're tracking how many mistakes they make. And the goal is 2 or less mistakes. If they make more than that, or if the timer goes off and they didn't get finished, they can try it one more time. I wouldn't keep trying it over and over because they're going to get really frustrated and they can't do it. So give them a couple of chances. If they don't do it that day, maybe try it again the next day and see if they can handle it then. Now, the way you would do these time checkouts is do those while the kids are working independently on their workbook and their textbook page, just one at a time, and you need to be sitting with them and have them read. And one thing I would recommend is try to pull them away from the group. Otherwise, if they sit right there at the table and they do it, the whole group is hearing them read, the whole group is distracted, plus the whole group is memorizing the words because they're hearing it over and over and over again. So try to move that student to a different location to do that activity. Okay? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Levels 2 and 3 and corrective reading are very, very similar. So if you're assigned to either of those, it's pretty much the same routine. All right, are we ready for the fun one?
We're ready.
We're ready. What time do you have, Miss Gala?
It's 2:30.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead, I guess, and start with the K, and maybe they'll be able to come in.
Okay.
All right. Now, you have a folder, and I put together a few resources inside of the folder for you, and we're going to look at the left-hand side first. If you just want to pull that out. This is from a kindergarten guide to help prepare you for teaching a kindergarten level. Now, you may not do that this year, but you may have to next year. You may have to, even at Christmas when we do another map test and we have to decide we've got to shift some personnel around. You may find that that's something you have to do at that point. I will tell you, if you can do K, you can do anything. Okay? It's really tough. And I don't know that you've ever done K. This is
No,
your
I'm
first
on 1, yeah.
You're doing 1,
Mm-hmm.
and 1 is building on K, so we'll get into 1 too. And do you know yet what you're doing?
It's kind of it's going to change probably.
It's probably going to change. Okay, so you may, even though you're third grade right
Right.
now, you still could possibly do a K level.
Okay.
Or a first grade level. But I want to show you, I want to start with K because I want to show you how K builds and leads into 1 and why 1 looks like it does. Because there's a lot of questions about why does the author write the text the way they do. It's because of what they've done in kindergarten, so it'll make sense to you. All right. What you're going to be doing mainly, actually from lessons 1 to 160 in the kindergarten book, you're always working with sounds. That's what it's all about, is the sounds. And the author of the book, who wrote all of the series, decided to, he knew that children get letters mixed up like B's and D's, and certain letters they get mixed up. So he gave them a funny look to them. The D looks very different than what we think of as the D. And he uses that throughout the kindergarten book. And then when first grade comes along, there comes a point when it shifts to the regular D, when it looks like they're ready for it in that regular form. There are times when letters will be connected together, like an S and an H, because they make the sh sound together. So they'll be connected. There won't be a space between the two letters. The S will run over into the H, and eventually that will fade away too. So there's certain things about the kindergarten book that looks a little different than what they normally see. Now, look at page 7. And the first 2 pages is just for your reading. I know you've got all kinds of spare time on your hands to read. Okay. When you look at a lesson, it's going to look something like you see down here at the bottom of the page. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but I want you to notice, see where it says symbol action right under the 6? That is telling you that it's a new track, which means we're starting a new skill, a new set of directions, a new way for kids to understand our procedures and what we're going to do. So anytime you see that star there, you know that you're starting a new track. It's very, very important that you study this ahead of time. Now, on a K and a 1 level, if you could look at a lesson, all right, I'm going to show you one. Here's an example of one lesson. Lesson number 9. And this lesson is not even a new track. This lesson has, whoops, lesson 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 18 different exercises. Means you're going to change directions 18 times. And if you try to go in and wing it, good luck. Because you're trying to figure out what you're supposed to do. The kids are getting restless. You're losing valuable time. So the people that wrote this book said they recommend, at least in the early stages, you take about 20 minutes every day to prepare for that lesson. Once you get into it and you get used to it, then you don't have to do that anymore. But up front, you really need to prepare for that. I have looked over this, and what we're doing today are so many different sets of directions. I'm sure I'm going to mess up. Okay, I'm probably not studied it as much as I needed to, but it takes a lot of prep for this. All right, so if we're looking at that page, we know that's a new exercise. You will see right underneath where it says exercise 3, do you see where it says children do what the picture shows? That is telling you that the directions are fixing to change, that the directions are going to be different here than what they've maybe done in exercise 2 or in exercise 1. Then you will see in your teacher's book, all of the words that you say are in blue. What the kids say or the kids do is always italicized. If there's a motion you're supposed to put with it, it's in parentheses. Just like if you were reading a play, and it'll say in parentheses, go to the front of the stage or whatever. It's that type of thing. Now, the problem that I always had is when I would read what was in blue and I would ask the question, I would want to say the answers with the kids, what was in italics. And I had to really watch that, so be very cautious that you're not giving the answers with them. There's a time when you model, usually up front you model it, but when it's time for them to do it on your own, you want to hear them, not yourself, and make sure they can do it. Any questions about that? Okay, the next page is the fun one. Here are the sounds that are taught in the kindergarten book. And if you look, you can already see that some of the letters are shaped a little bit differently. Like the CH and the SH, the D has a funny shape to it. That was done deliberately.